Now it's now 3 o'clock. This is a meeting of the Tooele County Board of Equalization. The board is composed of our county council members. We'd like to note that we have Councilman Thomas, Councilman Tripp, Councilman Hoffman, and Councilman Hamner. We expect that Councilman Wardle will be joining us very shortly. Says it is. Can you hear me now? Is it any different? There we go. Did you catch all that? Do I have to repeat it? First order of business is to examine the minutes of our October 18th, 2022 meeting. These were presented in your package for this meeting.
Mr. Chairman, I read those yesterday and found them to correct as best I can remember.
I'll second that.
It's been motioned and seconded. Any other comments? All those in favor of approving the minutes for the October 18th meeting, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It appears to be unanimous. Item number 4 is determination of the Friends of the Clark Historic Farm taxable status.
All right, Council, I did provide you with a fairly long summary or short summary and an extensive amount of information, but I'll just quickly kind of sum things up. Clark Farms purchased this property from Grantsville City, and when they purchased this property, the tax exempt status was never changed from governmental or permanent exempt status to just temporary exempt status. And so Clark Farms has enjoyed their tax exempt status. Now, they have not received any kind of notice to renew this tax exempt status because for the governmental entities, we don't send them notice every year that says you're tax exempt. They don't have to reapply. And so in their defense, there was nothing that gave them any kind of notice that they needed to reapply. This year, we did do kind of a review of that area and found out that they didn't have the correct exemption. And so that's why we're here today, to have you help us determine whether or not they should be tax exempt. The code does give the option for tax exempt, or give the requirements as religious, charitable, or educational, and that criteria is kind of broad. And then one other clarification is just because an entity is a 501c3 or a nonprofit doesn't automatically mean that they get to have this tax exempt status. We did give some recommendations. If you do decide that they are a taxable entity, we're not necessarily recommending that they have to go back and back pay. Of course, that is up to you. If you do decide that they're exempt, of course, we will have them come every year and apply for the exemption status just like the rest of our exempt properties do. Are there any questions or anything that I can help with? I do have both Marie from my office and Brandon who are here. They have great expertise in this area and done a great amount of legwork. They've also worked with Clark Farms. I'm not sure, I don't see anybody from Clark Farms here today. So.
Is this a practice on any other properties that we have throughout Tooele County?
I'll make one other clarification. Typically, you guys don't see this kind of stuff come before you. We do have a couple, I'll give you some other examples of ones that would or would not fall in this category. So for example, like the nursing home falls in this type of category. The Daughters of Utah Pioneers gets this type of an exemption. We do have various categories. Churches fall in this type of exemption. Like, anyway, so. The reason that this is coming before you is because there just wasn't a clear delineation about whether or not they were educational, religious, or charitable.
And just adding to the record, when we looked up their 503c1, it had been revoked 2 years ago for lack of filing financial plans. So their 50C3 had been revoked. Now, it could be reinstated, we don't know. They have refiled stuff. They filed it late, but it didn't get filed until their application came in to reinstate them. So that appears to have been probably May of 2021 they applied for reinstatement. That can take a couple of years to come through. But they went at least 3 years prior to that. That's why they got their status revoked.
And so, Chairman, what's the question is what what do we want to do from this point forward? Or are you asking what should we do in the past?
I would go with Allison's recommendation in the past. What's the annual value if it's not tax exempt?
We haven't, typically it doesn't have a value because it's exempt, so they haven't necessarily been given a
assessed.
value. Yeah.
They
And so,
purchased it for $84,000 in 2015. So the tax on that,
Allison, it was reassessed. I reassessed it this year.
do you know what it was?
do you recall what it is?
Let me hurry and look while you guys are,
I can look it up.
If you don't mind coming up to the mic to be recorded. Sorry, Chair.
No, that's fine. You know,
I can.
this is a group that mostly has events, some of which are. paid-
Fundraiser?
Some, you know, I think they'll probably go to somewhat fundraising, but you can rent that thing, you can, they used to have an admission, but they've taken it as a donation now for, I'm not sure what their status is, but they used to be $2 a person, now they're, put whatever you want in the bin.
This is an organization that also applies for TRT funding
They have,
on a regular basis.
correct.
What their taxes would be.
And I went through exhaustively and looked at the comparison of what they received and what their records to the government said. And with one minor exception, they're pretty close. And the other one is not material, it's a few $100 different.
Council, one other thing to know is that Clark Historic Farms does receive TRT funds from us, so we are a good partner with them as far as, you know, helping them in other ways and things like that. So,
What's the time crunch on this, Allison? If we don't decide one way or the other, do they get taxed then this year or next
yeah,
year?
that's what, we basically need to do it to determine 2022's taxes, and then, you know, we'll figure out what we do now will determine how we proceed forward.
And if we have a
So,
non-decision today, what does that do?
we'll just keep coming back to you until we
Get a decision?
get a decision.
Okay.
So,
We have Jake online now. I was talking with Jake about this yesterday. Jake, can you, come on, get on here and
right here.
tell him what you said to me about
This
this?
is YouTube, is it Zoom?
I did a Zoom for Jake.
Okay.
Yeah, so, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
All right, well, thank you, Chair and Council. So I kind of think, the best way to proceed on these issues is to deny. This is a little more complicated than most situations, being that their paperwork isn't in order. But I think it's probably great precedent to deny the status, and otherwise we set a precedent that nobody has to have any papers in order, and that we're granted to everybody. And the State Tax Commission, they have further rights to appeal this if they want to the State Tax Commission. And so if they feel like they're not being treated justly, they can continue that process, but that would be my recommendation.
Okay.
But if they got their paperwork in order, we wouldn't be here, right?
Correct.
Well, Jake, sort of though, because we've kind of messed up on it as far as their exemption though, right?
Oh, that's true. You're right.
So that exemption came from, originally, who'd it come from?
Grantsville City.
So,
They presumed it would continue ad infinitum.
so there's kind of two issues here. We made a mistake in that we kept their exemption on there. We kept Grantsville City's exemption on their property, so they haven't been paying taxes since 2015. And so when we discovered that mistake, it was too late for them to file the paperwork for the normal Board of Equalization process that Jake's talking about. And so normally we would send them through a process where they can say, I want to maintain this exemption in a different way. And so we kind of hit a weird timeline on top of a weird set of circumstances. Brandon just found the value, so the value of the property is $217,417, and their taxes would be $2,359.74
It's about $10,000 nominally.
over the course of time.
I guess my thought is, I think about what the farm is. It's an asset to the community. It's an educational thing where people can go gather and that. I don't see it being a profitable make money kind of, yeah, you want to make money so you can cover your costs. But I'm asking myself, why wouldn't we grant them the exempt status?
To grant everybody the exempt status, they apply or don't apply?
Well, and that's why I'm asking, if it's just a paperwork deal, and heaven forbid they're volunteers, nobody, I believe, is taking a salary here. So why don't we coach them through, help them through that problem, get it caught up, and then let's go forward.
So the criteria so we're willing to do that, and that's why we're here, is for you guys to decide whether or not they actually meet the criteria under the religious, charitable, or exemption criteria. So, religious, charitable, or educational criteria. So they did provide a curriculum as far as what they do educationally, and I believe that we forwarded that on to you as some field trips that they provide as far as educational. And like I mentioned, that those criteria are pretty broad, so you can definitely make that decision or that determination if you feel like what they've done for those field trips meets the educational criteria to fall into meeting that. This is truly your decision.
So here, and my thought process, because I've been involved in charitable foundations before, and we're asking them to pay $10,000 in property or taxes.
$2,500 a year. They've got the benefit of about $10,000 worth of taxes already.
So of that relief, is that
Yes.
tax relief? So that $2,500 to me, I mean, they're raising it, selling fundraisers, whatever they're doing for a fundraiser. I'd rather have them put that money back into the Clark Farm. And I could see, I'm supportive of giving them the exempt status.
Jake, were you gonna say something else?
I was just gonna say that, the statute, I believe, Allison, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it also says exclusive use for charitable, religious, use. So just when you make your decision, consider that.
Jake's correct.
So exclusive use being what?
So they would only use it for those purposes. So they would only use it for educational purposes. They would only use it for religious purposes, only use it for charitable purposes.
Which they do or do not?
Do not.
Well, that's pretty broad.
Well,
You can justify charitable, you can justify education too.
one of the questions I have, though, in stating that they do not, do we have certainty? No, they do not. Use them for those three reasons.
Well, they, in 2019, they leased their facility to the Western Songwriters and charged them $5,000 or $6,000 to use their facility for 3 or 4 nights. So it's that kind of situation where they do, and it's part of their fundraising, obviously.
So, but aren't we talking about 2022's tax exemption?
We're talking about their tax exempt status.
Yeah, for 2022, or are we reflecting backwards? Because I think that the idea, at least in the recommendations and what I've heard, is that we're not looking at having them pay back taxes.
No.
So we're looking at 2022 status.
Right. And typically, unless there's any reason to, unless there's any gross, change in the operations of a facility, we typically just move forward with whatever they are. I believe if you saw their bylaws, they do list 6 purposes that they have. Assisting, I believe, did you guys see those 6 purposes that they have? I don't know if you want me to read them out loud or.
Go ahead and just read it.
Okay, so encouraging attendance to the farm and its holdings through collaboration with members of the community, including individuals, groups, schools, and local entities. Fundraising to facilitate care of buildings and groups, capital improvements, preservation, special events, normal functions of the farm, interpretive purposes, and any other purpose deemed appropriate by the board and by IRS 501c3 regulations. Encouraging community involvement through volunteerism at the farm. Providing technical and professional expertise to the farm. Assisting in development and implementation of special events and programs that complete the mission of the farm, and any other activities deemed by the board as appropriate to fulfilling the mission.
So may I ask a question?
Sure.
That last one says to complete the mission of the farm. That mission would be outlined in the first 2 or 3 objectives. Am I correct?
Do you want me to read the mission that they have here?
Yes, please.
The mission of the Friends of the Clark Historic Farm is to preserve, promote, and improve the J. Reuben Clark Historic Farm and to honor those who build it by providing enjoyable family activities to inspire and educate people of the historic, cultural, and agriculture significance in Grantsville, Utah. The purpose, the Friends state the purpose is to support the farm by improving and expanding educational and recreational programs and activities and raising funds for acquisition, capital improvement, historically compatible restoration, special events, and programs.
Thank you.
Do I hear a motion one way or the other? Jake, are you still of the opinion that we ought to,
Can I make a comment before you start
Please.
making motions? I just want to make sure we have the right information. I'm pretty sure you don't exclusively have to use it as a charitable. Correct. Whatever the three terms are you just used in order to be qualified for the exemption. So I just want to make sure you are aware of that.
Well, and I guess my question takes, but they're county issues. So Salt Lake County has Wheeler Historical Farm, and that would be an example of this where it's not just exclusive use for the nonprofit, but they do hold wedding receptions there that allow for the upkeep and other things. When you talk about this is the place Monument Park, the same type of thing takes place there. I'm guessing that, and ballparking it, I'm guessing that if we went off of, if we went through the state of Utah, we'd see these in a lot of different places.
well,
So I think that I'm more inclined to bend on this, not bend, but to see how it can fit within the rules instead of outside, excluding them from them.
well,
And this issue came up actually from the old folks' homes down here next to the hospital because they use part of the facility to provide charitable services to people, and they were still qualified for the tax exempt status. That's why I was ringing in my ear that
That was a little bit different though, because
I don't know, it might be a
they had a
different code
percentage
section.
that they had to, and they met the criteria for the percentage. I'm looking at,
Yeah, but it wasn't exclusive, and I guess that's why I'm trying to get to the point. It doesn't have to be exclusive. I'll
no, it's okay. I'm gonna get a little bit.
responding to Councilman Wardle, it's fundamentally different in a little bit. Wheeler Farm is owned by Salt Lake County. This is the Place Monument is owned by state of Utah.
Not all of it.
Is it a state park or not?
Well, there's parts of it that are, but there are parts that are run for a commercial purpose.
That are leased inside there?
By nonprofit organizations.
Okay,
So this is what it says in the standards of use. Exemptions can only be granted to property used exclusively for religious, charitable, or educational purposes. Exemptions can be granted to parts of properties to satisfy exclusive use, but they must be clearly separated physically from any profit activity. So we would have to assess that property based on what parts they use commercially and what parts they exclusively use for educational purposes.
up front, or can you say, I'm designating that half of my business model is,
And that's what we did with Rocky Mountain Care is, this proportion is,
yeah, we came with a percentage?
yes,
That's right, okay, that's the recollection I had.
yes.
So could we do that for Clark Historic Farm and say half of their property is this, or whatever?
I hate to kick the ball down the court, but I don't know that we have all the information I'd like. I'd like to know, have they re-achieved their 501c3 status? Are they willing to declare what part is and which part is not?
But why does that matter, especially if we're dealing with, what I'm looking at and thinking about is two issues here. Is one, they didn't get the paperwork in time and correctly and on time. However, prior to that, we made a mistake in determining their proper status. So I agree with Jake that I don't like setting the precedence that we allow people to get out of the taxes, but we made a mistake in this, so in my opinion, we give them an exception this one time. If it happens again, they're paying the taxes. That's
So-
kind of the way I'm leaning for this one
I
time.
think
In
we're
the
gonna-
past,
Yeah,
Ty, I think we're kind of missing, so we found our mistake after it was too late for them to apply for the exemption status that they would have been looking for. So under normal circumstances, it's absolutely true that they missed the deadline for filing the exemption that they need. But we found the mistake after it was too late. And so that issue's sort of off the table. However,
So can we grant an exemption for 1 year?
you can, I'm gonna be right back here with you with this issue though for 2023.
And my suggestion is in 2023, that many of the questions that are being asked today, that if they apply for that exemption, that they provide documentation. Does that make sense?
So you want me to come back before you with 2023?
It would be December of 2023.
It'll be in March. Because the actual deadline for this is March.
Oh, well then if we have deadline in March, then let's kick this kitty down the road.
No,
No,
it's not.
Did you see my smile?
Hey,
I know, but
You know, I think we're making a lot bigger deal about this than what we need to do. They meet all the requirements.
No, they don't.
Charitable, educational, for certain, whether they do all three. They're an asset to the community. We're splitting hairs over this here. Yeah, they'll get their act together, I believe that. So I make the motion that we grant them the taxable, the status, the council determined this, I gotta read where I'm at here. Grant them the taxable status. We gotta
Exempt.
taxable or taxable exempt.
Tax exempt, thanks, Allison, thank you. So that's my motion, tax exempt status.
perpetually going forward. if
No,
I
you
can
can't
ask-
perpetually do it. It has to be annual. That's the state code.
We want to do it just like we treat everybody else that meets this requirement.
Or treat everybody else that meets the requirement because they meet the requirement, not because they don't.
This is a group that's volunteers.
Mr. Chairman, there's been a motion. We need to either second it or go up and down and then debate it.
Is there a second? Motion fails. I'll make an alternate motion that we proceed to give them not the status this year, but could rebate it to them in the future when they meet the submission for the tax exempt status, and also demonstrate that they are again a 501c3 and meet those requirements. Is there anyone want to second that motion? Hearing none, that one fails.
Mr. Chairman, I
Is
make,
there an alternate motion?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion, we table this until the second meeting in January and ask Clark Historic Farm if they did for-profit events that were for the continued preservation of the farm, ask them for a listing of what they did educationally, religiously, and to meet those, and then we revisit this in the second meeting and give them 1 month.
Does that timeline meet for you, Allison?
Sure.
Do I hear a second to that
I'll
motion?
second that one.
He seconded it.
Further discussion at all?
Council, would you also like their 501c3 reinstatement?
Yes.
And I would, I requested from them their expenditure and income details back in June of 15. They never complied. They owe me $20 a day since then.
Well, make sure you're here at the first meeting to get it from us.
Okay.
I call question.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
No. I don't know
Roll
why the hell
call.
we can't get it done.
Kendall Thomas.
Said hell no.
Tripp says yay.
Aye.
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 Motion passes. Let's go on to,
What an interesting event.
let's go on to 4 abatement adjustments. If you've got in your package, there's a summary sheet of all the various exemptions that we've granted this year. These include veterans exemptions and circuit breaker exemptions. I think the charitables are not on this list, or they are?
I'm sorry, the what?
Charitable.
No, they are, so they
So
are
you've
on
got
this
the
list.
complete list here.
Yes,
And our obligation is to approve them?
yes.
Just to notice that they're there?
No, so council, I do want you to approve, you do need to approve these. So I had this discussion last night with Councilman Hoffman. There are, there's only one category, and that's the charitable ones that you guys have discretionary oversight over. The rest of these categories are mandatory as long as the citizen meets the requirement. The total amount of the abatements is $2.188 million worth of abatements. We do get reimbursed from the state for the circuit breaker portion, which is about $206,000. The total amount of abatements, this summary is a little bit skewed in how it reports, but the total amount of abatements is 1,235 abatements. Our biggest category of abatements is for our veterans, and so they do appreciate that. But I do need to have you approve this just so that you acknowledge that we have given the abatements.
So did you say the total dollar amount and I just missed it?
Yeah, 2.188,286.34.
And then we get 206,000 of that back?
Yes.
Okay.
And some of these guys are not really up to our discretion. We just have to do it.
Yep.
Most of them are that
But
way.
yeah,
In fact, the
Or
majority.
800
all
of-
but 38 of them are not up to your discretion.
Most of them are the veterans, like you said, over 800 of them.
I mean, our veterans have taken a beating in the last few years. This is not, I mean, not to even, this is an opportunity to say thank you. And I think at times when our nation's really divided, we have to remember those who make it so we can divide against one another. That
And-
freedom.
And I will say, council, even our circuit breakers, this abatement is for those citizens who are 66 and above who make less than $35,000. And so the elderly people who visit our office are extremely grateful for this abatement. And it's really nice to be able to have something to offer to help those who need it, so.
Well, I'll make a motion then to approve the 2022 abatement adjustments.
Do I hear a second? Been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Appears to be unanimous. Now we're going to move down to another category. These are assessor corrections. And these assessor corrections are originating various ways. Some of them are related to state audits. Some of them are related to appeals. Some of them are technical corrections. And
Mess of them in there.
interestingly, when you add them all up, there's a slight positive of $53,000 more taxes. These are mostly green belts, things that were in green belt that are no longer green belt approved. So if you looked at them individually, the vast majority of them are reductions, but a couple of them are tens of thousands of dollar increases. Is there any discussion on any of these in particular?
No, I've looked through them, and I talked to Jake about them as well yesterday. I'll make a motion, we approve the notice of corrections from the assessor's office.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None? I'll accept a motion to adjourn these proceedings.
So moved.
All in favor? Aye. Too late, Kendall. Don't need a second for that one. And we're supposed to reconvene for a work meeting at 3:15. It's now nearly 3:30.
Everybody ready to go?
Yeah, let's
Yeah.
Let me know when you're ready.